Good day, this is Jason with Net.Academy/LA Networks. Net.Academy is really just the kind of community outreach arm of LA Networks. It started from a Cisco user group called the Southern California Cisco User Group that I helped found in 1999. And I've been involved in that community ever since. It's a big part of who I am personally and who LA Networks is as a company. We like to see network engineers doing the best work that they can do, succeeding to the best of their ability, just improving those skills. I've been a network engineer since 1995. I am fairly Cisco-centric, but not entirely. I work with lots of other vendors. And in fact, this new series I'm kicking off is really about doing networking in the cloud, in particular the AWS cloud. Although, as you'll see, we will cover other clouds like Azure and GCP, and there is some overlap. I don't know if I want to say a lot, but there is some. First things first, if you need to get a hold of me, you can either email me at the address on the screen, or you could just comment on the video below. I do my best to respond to all comments. If you want a copy of the slides, email is best. I will send them over. There are some embedded links, so if you're interested in learning more in depth about AWS networking and would like to read through some of that auxiliary material, please let me know. And if you don't mind, if you like the content, please leave us a thumbs up. Maybe consider giving us a subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified when we upload new content, which is a little all over the place as we try to figure out this transition to YouTube, you want to subscribe to, or click that little subscribe bell. Okay, that said, let's dive right in. So first is some housekeeping. I just want you to be aware. I don't know how far this series is going to go or where we're going to take it necessarily. I've done professional training for different companies on how to kind of bootstrap their network engineers to get ready for cloud. But in this particular case, a couple of things that are going to cover no matter where we head. One, we're really going to cover the basics. It's all going to be practical knowledge, right? I'm not worried about you trying to get your certs or anything like that. Go get those certs. I'm a big believer in certs. I'm not against certs. It's not what the point of this channel is, though, right? We're not really a cert channel. We're a hands-on practical engineering channel. These are the things I do day to day. I've been working in AWS networking for about 10 years. And these are all the things I'm doing day to day for my different accounts, right? Anything that I demo in here, and I'm a big believer in demos in general, will be done with something known as a free tier account. And free tiers in quotes. Basically, anyone can pretty much make a free tier account. It just requires an email and a credit card. The credit card doesn't get charged unless you do something to bust out of the free tier. If you'd like to know what those sorts of things could be, ask for the slides and you'll click a link. I don't want to put static information in a slide when it changes occasionally. So with that, let's go ahead and let's get started. So the first thing is a couple of global building blocks, regions and availability zones. And I think these get overlooked too often, to be honest with you. A region is exactly what it sounds like. It's a geographic region. The map that you kind of see over here, it's a couple years old now, so it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it gives you a feel for these are all the geographies across the globe that AWS was in at the time, right? Over 30 regions, right? So let's call it 36 by now, maybe. I don't know. Could be a few more, could be a few less, but let's call it around 36. And then within a region, contained within a region, is the concept of an availability zone. An availability zone does not span the region, it's contained within the region. And think of an availability zone as a data center or a co-location facility, right? So it could be more than one data center. If you've ever worked in co-location facilities, you may know they have multiple buildings sometimes as part of a campus, and then they may have another campus down the road or a couple towns over or something, and then they'll have like tons of fiber and resources going between them. It's the exact same thing with an availability zone. Each AZ that's short for availability zone. Each AZ is independent of one another. Different power, different network, different cooling, all those sorts of things are going to be different, right? And so it's important to understand that an availability zone isn't a single building. It could be multiple buildings. It could be one building. Just depends on where you're at geographically, right? And it's contained within a subsection of a region. Each region is generally broken into 3 or more availability zones. Now, there are caveats. There are regions with only 2 availability zones. I think Sweden is one of those. I think maybe Osaka, Japan is one of those. But most regions are going to have 3 or more, right? I think the most I know of is 6. I think that US East 1, which is the largest region, has 6 availability zones. And the AZs are kind of the first cornerstone of HA in the cloud. If I deploy something in one AZ, I can make it a little more resilient, or maybe a lot more resilient, if I deploy it in a second AZ as well. Hopefully that makes some sense, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. One tip I would recommend is start to learn the differences between which services run at, say, the account level, the global level, the region level, the AZ level, etc., right? So I find that understanding the scope of any given service within the hierarchy of services helps you understand the impact of perhaps a change or an outage or deployment or any of those sorts of things, right? So for example, we'll get into this later, but when we create subnets, they're limited to the AZ level. A subnet can't span an AZ. And generally speaking, a subnet cannot span an AZ. They're constrained within the AZ level. It's important to know that, just like we talked about how the AZ can't span outside of its region. It's contained as a subsection of a region, right? So we're going to end the session talking about our first and most fundamental concept, and that's the VPC, or Virtual Private Cloud. The VPC is a regional construct. So when I build a VPC, when I deploy a VPC, it covers an entire region. And that means by default, all availability zones are AZs within the region, right? So if I build, I'm going to use Oregon as an example. If I build a VPC in Oregon, Oregon has 4 AZs, AZ 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that VPC will have access to all 4 of the availability zones. Okay? So we'll get a lot more into availability zones, subnets, etc., but just keep these concepts kind of loosely in your mind when we're talking about them. Let's talk about the VPC. Like I said, it's a regional construct. And when you create a VPC, you just need really one main piece of information, and that is you need a CIDR block. Typically, doesn't have to be, but typically it's going to be private IP address range. So it's going to be something like 10.1.0.0/18 or something. The CIDR block can actually range from a /16 to a /28. That first CIDR block that you assign, and you can have more than one CIDR block in a VPC, but the first one you assign, it's going to be uneditable. It's immutable, right? It can't be changed. I can't deploy it as, say, a /24 and then later on go and say, I need more space. Let me just open it up to a /23. It doesn't work like that in AWS. It does in some of the other clouds, like in Azure and GCP, with some caveats, but it does work a little differently there. That has to do with how the subnets and the AZs kind of get defined in some of those other clouds. But in AWS, that first block is more or less immutable. However, you can add additional CIDR blocks. I don't know what the upper limit is these days, but I have VPCs that are running with upwards of 7 CIDR blocks. So You can definitely add a lot more. And if you started with a /28 because you thought, oh, I just need one host or something and I can't go smaller than a 28, and then you're like, well, I guess this kind of took off. They're going to need more address space, so I gave them a 24 because that's as big as our VLANs really get in our data center. And then they're kind of like, oh, they needed even more. Okay, so then I gave them a /23, right? At some point, you want to start reading those tea leaves and realizing, okay, maybe the next CIDR block I add, it should be like something bigger, a /20, a /18, a /16, something like that. One other thing, when you create your VPC, so you hit create VPC up on the menu, and then you're going to go in, you're going to assign your CIDR block, 10.1.0.0/18 or whatever it is. And then you're going to hit submit. When it instantiates that VPC in that particular region, it's also going to build something known as the intrinsic router. You can kind of see it as like a dashed router icon in the center of the slide right now. You have limited purview over the intrinsic router, and we're going to talk more about the intrinsic router in future sessions, but it's what allows routing within a VPC. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. By the way, I should have said this at the top, but VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. Virtual because it's on someone else's gear, AWS's. Cloud because it's someone else's data center, AWS's. Private because until you do something like adding a gateway into that VPC, there's no traffic allowed in or out of the VPC. Everything you can build in there can only talk to other things you build in there. They can't get to the internet. They can't get back to your corporate HQ, none of that, right? So it truly is pretty private at that point. Also, a quick recommendation. When you first create your account, AWS is going to create a default VPC in every single region that they have, or that you have access to, I should say. That's fine. It's just meant so that you can get up and running really quick if you don't understand networking. But what I find is it leads to confusion when you start getting ready for deployments. Every default VPC looks identical regardless of the region. They use the exact same IP addresses everywhere. They're automatically open to the internet. And so when your application teams come in to start deploying applications, they may see two different VPCs. Well, do I go into this one? Do I go into this one? One of them says default. They probably think, well, I probably want to go in the default VPC, right? And you might not want that. You might not want an internet gateway just allowing traffic into your VPC, for example, right? I mean, application people are not often thinking, how do I lock down an application and secure it? They are usually thinking, I want to get my app up and running and reachable. Likewise, you might not take the default VPC and connect it back to your corporate HQ. So you might find all sorts of problems. I strongly recommend, at a minimum, in the regions you're going to be working in, delete the default VPCs. You could just delete all the default VPCs that get created. There used to be a time where they were kind of required. That's just no longer the case. I would go ahead and recommend it. So I think that's where we'll wrap today. You could do me one big favor, which is, as I said at the beginning, I need feedback. Is this the sort of stuff you're interested in? Are there other things? Here at Net.Academy, so far we've done an OSPF series that did pretty well. We have a Wi-Fi 6E versus 7 series that just launched. And now we're taking on a cloud, AWS cloud networking series. I need to understand what your desires are. What do you want to learn about? What do you want to discuss, right? If you have ideas on how to enrich the community, I'm happy to discuss those as well. You have my email at the beginning of this. You can also just leave a comment. I do love to get some interaction going, so please feel free. That being said, thank you for spending your time with us today at Net.Academy, and I'll talk to you later.
Need help? Call our cybersecurity team and book a consultation with us today.